Hi, and welcome to another writing and drawing update. I'm now on day 27 of my month-long writing and drawing challenge, so nearly at the end, but I might cram a little bit on the last couple of days just to get a little more progress in. So here I'm drawing a potential setting for my novel with a couple of potential characters put in there for scale, though I'm not really going to draw out the characters this time because I haven't quite designed them. I haven't figured out what they wear or how they do their hair or anything like that. So I might come back later when I've figured out some of the details of the characters and draw them into all the settings that I'm making this time around. But my focus this time is mostly just the settings because I find those most helpful in helping me visualize stuff while writing descriptions. So for the writing itself, to recap, the first pass through the story I did was just reading the draft because I hadn't read it in a while. I'd just been adding to it without reading it. So the first pass was just reading. The second pass was basically creating a sort of outline where I started with a timeline listing month 1, month 2, month 3, and so on for in-universe passage of time, and then listing all the main plot points that happened, which I'd already written in the scenes but kind of still needed some work. So I listed all the plot points, and then I did a pass of questions and answers where I'd go through each plot point and ask myself what I didn't like about it, what needed to be added, why the different characters did what they did or what they wanted, all sorts of missing details. It was easy to first frame them all as questions, but I also added answers as best as I could, whatever hints of an answer I had. So the second pass was just basically doing that for every plot point until I reached the end of the story. And after I'd done that, it became really clear why I'd had this vague sense of unease or dissatisfaction with parts of the story, because I'd written thousands of words of questions and complaints and brainstorms about the plot points, which were basically things I didn't know and felt were missing. And as I was brainstorming the possibilities, it became clear that any of these answers would probably be fine. There isn't one best way to solve this problem. This is my story and I can kind of do whatever I want. As long as I spent some time thinking about it and doing something that sent me in an interesting direction, I could already feel that the story was better. So, where in the past I thought that I hadn't chosen the right plot point, or, there was something wrong with what happens in the story, it was more a matter of needing to think through these motivations and background effects and side stories, and as long as I thought them through, I was going to make the story better. That was reassuring. It wasn't about choosing the best answer. It was just about going deeper and deeper into why this and how that. Basically, the more detail of the why and how that I knew, the better the story was going to be. Or at least the better it would seem to me, and the more convinced I would be of it. Because most of this detail is probably not going to make it into the final book. I don't know which parts will and which parts won't, but it's more about making things fleshed out and real and have them kind of come into focus for me so that I can believe the story when I tell it. So right now I'm focusing on deciding what happens exactly in the story, in terms of what happens in the main plot, what happens in the characters' minds, what happens off somewhere in a distant land. So I'm deciding all of that stuff, but I'm not really thinking yet about how I'm going to tell the story. Which parts do I tell the reader about? What is the tone? Where does each scene start? All that kind of stuff. Those will be decisions for a future round of revisions. And I can't really work on that until I'm clear on what actually happens. So that was my second pass through the story. So every plot point had some questions and some answers. And as usual, the amount of clarity kind of tapered off toward the end. I spent most of my time developing the beginning, and then at some point I wasn't as clear about what happened because it probably depended on the earlier decisions, which I hadn't fully made. So I got started on the third pass, where I just went right back to the beginning of the plot point Q&A and read everything I'd written for each plot point, answered any additional questions that I was now able to answer that I guess my brain had been working on in the background. And additionally, more questions occurred to me each time I looked at the plot points. I'd say, well, okay, this is what happens, but then why does that happen? And so, there's always more I could ask myself, and at some point I think I will have to stop. More detail isn't always better. So hopefully I'll catch myself when I get to the point where I'm just outlining and outlining endlessly as a form of procrastination. But everything I've been doing so far has been getting me closer to drafting and more confident about my story. So I'm excited to see where this goes, and thank you for following along. Bye.